Ava Brooks never imagined she'd be slapped. On her own plane. The sound cracked through the air like a whip, freezing every passenger in place. Her cheek burned from the blow as stunned gasps rippled through the cabin. A few passengers fumbled for their phones, raising them shakily to record what they were seeing. Standing over her, blonde-haired flight attendant Melissa Carter glared down with venom in her eyes. "People like you need to know your place?" she hissed. What Melissa didn't realize was that Ava Brooks wasn't just another economy passenger in worn jeans and a hoodie. She was the billionaire CEO of Skynova Airlines, the very company that owned the jet they were flying in. At 35, Ava had disrupted the aviation industry with bold ideas and a fierce determination that made Wall Street tremble. And yet, despite all her wealth and power, she was being humiliated, dismissed, treated as if she didn't matter in her own empire. But if Melissa thought Ava would shrink back in silence, she was gravely mistaken. That slap wasn't just an act of prejudice. It was a spark that would ignite a firestorm shaking the entire airline industry to its core and changing Melissa's life in ways she could never imagine. Are you ready to hear the story of the slap at 35,000 feet? The moment that transformed one woman's humiliation into a movement that would rewrite the rules of the skies? Amara Johnson felt the sting on her cheek before her brain could process what had happened. The sharp crack echoed through the aircraft cabin, silencing the low hum of passenger chatter and the metallic clink of the beverage cart. Every pair of eyes turned toward row 28, where she stood frozen, her backpack hanging limply from one shoulder. Her glasses had been knocked askew, one lens smeared from the impact, and the faint scent of Samantha Miller's floral perfume still lingered in the air between them. "Know your place?" Samantha hissed, her voice tight with anger as she smoothed her navy uniform skirt. Amara blinked, trying to ground herself, her heart pounding so violently it drowned out the rest of the world. Passengers gasped in disbelief. A toddler stopped crying mid-wail. Even the college student in the aisle seat beside her yanked out his earbuds, staring wide-eyed at the scene. Amara's cheek burned, but not nearly as much as the humiliation searing through her chest. She could feel her breath coming shallow, but she didn't flinch, didn't step back. This wasn't her first encounter with someone like Samantha Miller. What Samantha didn't know, what no one knew, was that Amara owned the very aircraft they were standing on, that she was the founder and CEO of Aurora Air, the luxury airline she had built from the ground up to disrupt the entire aviation industry. And right now, her company, her vision, her reputation hung in the balance point. 2 hours earlier, the Aurora Air A350 sat gleaming on the tarmac at Sydney International Airport, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Amara stood in boarding group 4, wearing faded jeans, a black t-shirt, and white sneakers. Her curls were pulled back into a low ponytail, and she carried a battered canvas backpack instead of her usual leather briefcase. The perfect disguise. "Are you sure about this?" Andre's voice echoed in her mind from earlier that morning. "You're worth nearly $4 billion, Amara," her assistant had said. "You don't need to fly economy to evaluate service quality. We have mystery shoppers for that." "Mystery shoppers don't see what I see," she had countered with a small smile. Andre had sighed in exasperation. "One day, this habit of yours is going to backfire." He had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. Zone 4 was called. Amara shuffled forward with the other passengers, her boarding pass clutched in her hand. The agent barely glanced at it before waving her through. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Washington," he said, using the alias she booked under. Stepping into the cool air-conditioned cabin, Amara smiled politely at the blonde flight attendant greeting passengers at the door. "Welcome aboard," Samantha Miller said automatically, her eyes flicking over Amara's casual clothes and moving on to the sharply dressed man behind her. It wasn't the first time Amara had been dismissed like that, and it wouldn't be the last. She found her way to row 22, only to see her assigned middle seat already occupied. A white woman in her mid-40s lounged there, her designer bag spilling over the adjacent seat. "Excuse me," Amara said gently. "I believe this is my seat." The woman didn't even glance up. "I switched with the gate agent. Medical condition. Needed an aisle." Before Amara could respond, Samantha appeared beside them, her expression already tight with annoyance. "Is there a problem here?" Amara showed her boarding pass. "This is my seat." Samantha barely glanced at it. "We've had some seat reassignments. You're in 28E now. Please take your new seat so we can continue boarding." "That's a downgrade," Amara said evenly. "I booked this seat weeks ago." "We need to keep the boarding process moving," Samantha snapped. "If you have a complaint, take it up with customer service after landing." Amara's first instinct was to reveal her identity, but she stopped herself. This was why she flew incognito. To witness exactly this kind of failure in service wordlessly, she turned and made her way to the rear of the plane. Now, the slap had come during a confrontation over the lavatory. Amara had waited patiently as other passengers, white passengers, were allowed to use the closed-for-cleaning restroom in the rear of the plane. But when she tried, Samantha had stepped into her path, barking about federal regulations and problem passengers. Amara had remained calm, as she always did. Calm when luxury car salesmen had directed her to the economy models. Calm when security guards in her own office building demanded ID while white visitors walked past unchecked. But this time, calm hadn't protected her. This time, Samantha's hand had lashed out before Amara could say another word. The sharp taste of blood bloomed in Amara's mouth as she straightened her spine, staring Samantha down. "You just assaulted a passenger?" Amara said quietly, her voice deadly calm. Samantha's eyes widened, a flicker of doubt breaking through her mask of superiority. Around them, passengers began murmuring, their voices growing louder. A man in premium economy stood, holding up his phone. "I got it all on video," he announced. "Same here," said another woman across the aisle. Samantha paled. From the galley, a male flight attendant, Mateo Rivera, rushed forward, his expression stricken. "What happened?" he demanded. "This woman," Samantha began, pointing at Amara, "has been nothing but polite," interrupted Leah Wong, an attorney seated a few rows up. "I've been watching since boarding. Your colleague has harassed her the entire flight." Mateo's eyes darted between Amara's flushed cheek and Samantha's trembling hand. "Ms. Miller, step aside," he ordered. "Now." Samantha's voice faltered as passengers began pulling out their phones. Recording. Mateo turned to Amara, his voice soft. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" Amara shook her head, her mind already racing through legal implications, PR nightmares, and the impact on Aurora Air's reputation. "No," she said evenly. "But I will need to speak to the captain." The cabin was alive now, buzzing like an angry hive. Amara felt the shift, the power dynamics tilting, the realization dawning on Samantha's face that she might have just ruined her career, and Amara knew this was only the beginning. This flight, meant to be a quiet observation, had become ground zero for a storm that could consume her airline or transform the entire industry. But for now, she kept her secret and no one. Not Samantha, not Mateo, not the dozens of passengers filming, knew that the quiet black woman in row 28 was the billionaire owner of the plane they were flying on. And that revelation would shake the aviation world to its core. The chill of a Melbourne winter seeped through the thin walls of the Johnson family's tiny apartment, where Amara sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, a library book balanced carefully in her lap. The soft hum of the radiator was drowned out by her mother's tired voice from the kitchen. "Amara, lights out in 15, Patrice Johnson called, her words heavy with exhaustion after a 16-hour shift split between a hospital cleaning job and an overnight packing line at a food warehouse. "Yes, Mom," Amara murmured automatically, though her eyes remained glued to the page. She was 8 years old, but her mind was already far from this cramped two-bedroom flat in Fitzroy, where she shared a bunk bed with her younger twin brothers and dreamt of a life bigger than Centrelink payments and second-hand school uniforms. The book in her lap spoke of faraway places, towering cities and glittering airports, powerful people who made decisions that rippled across the globe. She devoured each word like it was a secret map out of her world. Even at 8, Amara knew she didn't fit where she was, and neither did her dreams. Girls like us don't go to Oxford. At school, Amara's brilliance didn't go unnoticed. Her Year 3 teacher, Mrs. Patel, was the first to notice how Amara breezed through reading levels meant for teenagers. "You're going places, Amara?" Mrs. Patel whispered one afternoon, sliding across a battered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird under the desk. "But promise me something. Don't let anyone tell you where you can't go because of where you started." Those words stayed with Amara long after Mrs. Patel left for a teaching job in the UK. Because as she grew older, the world seemed determined to tell her exactly where she couldn't go at her underfunded public high school. Amara maintained a flawless GPA despite hand-me-down textbooks and teachers too overwhelmed to care. But her career advisor, a white man with a forced smile, had a different vision for her future. "You should think practical," he said, flipping through her file without looking her in the eye. "Nursing, teaching, maybe hairdressing. Solid jobs for a young woman like you." "I want to study business and finance," Amara said evenly. "International markets. Maybe aviation logistics." He chuckled. "Ambitious, but let's be realistic. Girls from your background don't usually end up in boardrooms. Especially, not to sound harsh, with your skin color." Amara walked out of his office that day with fire in her chest. The application that changed everything when Amara applied to Oxford Said Business School. She didn't tell anyone. Not her mother, not her friends, and certainly not her guidance counselor. She wrote her application essay in the middle of the night, sitting on the bathroom floor so the light wouldn't wake her brothers. Her essay wasn't polished. It didn't quote management gurus or cite fancy leadership theories. It told the story of her mother, an immigrant who cleaned hospital floors by day and flipped burgers at night, and how Amara wanted to build businesses that gave people like Patrice Johnson a way out of dead-end jobs. When the acceptance letter arrived, complete with a full scholarship, Amara's hands shook so hard she nearly tore the envelope. Her mother cried for the first time in years, clutching the letter as though it were a winning lottery ticket. "You're going to change the world, baby girl," Patrice whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't let them break you." A different kind of battle. Oxford wasn't the dream Amara imagined. The sandstone buildings and manicured quads felt like walking into a foreign country. In lecture halls filled with polished accents and expensive watches, she was one of the only black students at first. She thought she'd imagined it. The subtle slights, the way study groups forgot to include her, professors skipping over her raised hand in seminars. But the message was clear. She didn't belong. Or so they thought. Each microaggression only sharpened her resolve. Amara worked harder than everyone else, staying up through the night to prepare presentations and outthink classmates who'd grown up attending elite prep schools. When graduation day came, she wasn't just in the top 10% of her class. She was top. Her commencement speech, fiery and unapologetic, caught the attention of Victoria Bennett, a venture capitalist known as much for her ruthlessness as her ability to spot game-changing talent. "I like the way you think," Victoria said afterward, her piercing blue eyes studying Amara like a hawk sizing up prey. "Ever thought about disrupting an industry?" Amara smiled, that familiar fire in her chest. "All the time." The idea that took flight 3 years later, sitting in a London coffee shop surrounded by charts and spreadsheets. Amara saw an opening that no one else did. Commercial airlines were floundering, caught between rising costs and plummeting customer satisfaction. Private jets were exclusive to billionaires. But what about the people in between? Executives, entrepreneurs, even families willing to pay a premium for better service. Amara sketched the first blueprint of Aurora Air on a paper napkin that day. Her pitch to Victoria was blunt. "I want to build an airline that combines the efficiency of commercial flights with the luxury of private travel. Something that will make legacy carriers obsolete." Victoria didn't hesitate. "I'll fund you," she said. "Don't make me regret it." From startup to sky empire, Aurora Air launched quietly, with just 3 aircraft and a handful of routes between London, Singapore, and Sydney. But Amara's relentless focus on service, cutting-edge technology, and a diverse leadership team set the airline apart. Within 5 years, Aurora Air had become a global phenomenon. By age 35, Amara was a billionaire, the youngest black woman to make Forbes' list in history. But she never forgot the Melbourne nights spent huddled in a freezing apartment or the guidance counselor who had told her to dream smaller, which is why she had developed one unorthodox habit as CEO, traveling incognito on her own flights. "Every time I stop flying with my customers," she told her executives, "is the day I lose touch with what matters." The warning Andre had warned her that morning before she boarded the Sydney to London flight. "You're tempting fate, Amara," he said as she adjusted her backpack. "One day, someone's going to treat you badly, and you'll regret not using your name to shield yourself." Amara had only smiled. "That's the point, Andre. If they treat me badly, imagine how they're treating everyone else." What Amara didn't know was that her latest undercover trip would test her principles in ways she couldn't imagine. And that Samantha Miller's slap wouldn't just leave a mark on her cheek, that it would spark a chain of events that could burn her entire empire to the ground, or transform it forever. The Aurora Air headquarters in Singapore shimmered like a glass and steel monument to ambition. From the 37th floor, Amara Johnson stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, arms folded, watching one of her sleek aircraft taxi across Changi Airport's runway. It had been 5 years since she'd pitched her impossible idea in a cramped London cafe. 5 years since the world laughed at a young black woman with no aviation pedigree daring to disrupt an industry dominated by billion-dollar legacy carriers, and no one was laughing now. Aurora Air wasn't just profitable. It had changed the rules of air travel. Every glossy magazine cover hailed Amara as the queen of the skies. But she never believed her own press. Behind the headlines and the billion-dollar valuation, she knew cracks could form, subtle ones invisible to boardroom reports and KPIs. That's why she flew incognito. The philosophy that kept her grounded: "Amara, you're worth $4.3 billion. Andre Patel, her longtime chief of staff, said one morning as she zipped up a battered backpack. "You don't need to sit in economy with your knees crammed against a tray table to monitor service quality. I need to see what my passengers see," she countered, pulling her hair into a low ponytail. "Mystery shoppers can't replicate bias. Executive reports don't reveal the microaggressions people of color or women face." Andre frowned. "You can't fix every prejudice personally." "No," she admitted, "but I can't fight what I don't understand." "Mark my words," Andre warned as she slung the bag over her shoulder. "One of these trips is going to test you in ways you aren't ready for." Amara offered him a wry smile. "That's the point." The flight that changed everything. 2 weeks later, she booked herself on Aurora Air's Sydney to London route under a variation of her middle name. Amara Elise, NO first-class seat. No VIP treatment. Just row 27, seat D. A middle seat in economy. At check-in. She dressed down. Loose jeans, plain white trainers, an oversized hoodie. Her watch was a cheap plastic Casio. No designer handbag, no makeup. "Traveling light today, Ms. Elise?" the smiling agent asked. "You could say that." As she boarded, Amara passed through the glowing first-class cabin, where champagne glasses sparkled and polished executives barely glanced her way. "Funny," she thought. "If they knew who I was, they'd trip over themselves to say hello." But in her hoodie and sneakers, she was invisible. Exactly how she wanted it. The warning signs. Row 27 was crammed near the rear of the plane. The aisle seat was already occupied by a burly man in a business suit. His tie loosened and briefcase wedged under the seat as Amara moved toward her seat. She saw a flight attendant with platinum blonde hair and a taut smile. Samantha Miller, senior cabin crew. Staring at her, something about Samantha's eyes made Amara pause, cold, calculating. "Excuse me, I think I'm in 27D, Amara said politely to the young woman sitting in her assigned seat. "Oh, I switched with the gate agent," the woman said dismissively, her diamond studs catching the light. "Medical issue. I need the aisle." Before Amara could respond, Samantha materialized. "Is there a problem here?" Amara showed her boarding pass. "I believe this is my seat." "We've reassigned you," Samantha said curtly. "You'll be in 32F now. Please keep the aisle clear so others can board." 32F is in the rear cabin, Amara said, her voice even. "This seat was booked weeks ago." "We're busy," Samantha snapped. "If you have a complaint, take it up after the flight." Amara's fingers itched to pull rank, to announce that she owned the plane, the airline, the very uniform Samantha was wearing. But she didn't. This was why she flew incognito, to see the cracks, to feel the disrespect her passengers might endure. With a calm nod, Amara took her reassigned seat, another middle seat. this time squeezed between two passengers who had already claimed both armrests. Microaggressions in the sky. As the flight progressed, Amara watched closely. She saw Samantha lingering in the premium cabins, chatting with white executives and offering them generous pours of wine and economy. Her smile became perfunctory, her voice clipped. She ignored passengers of color, rushing past their raised hands. When the beverage cart finally reached row 32, Samantha served Amara's seatmates promptly. Then, without even glancing at her, Samantha pushed the cart forward. "Excuse me," Amara said softly. "Could I have some water, please?" Samantha turned, her eyes flashing with irritation. "We're out in this cart. I'll get you one later." Later never came. The spark of tension 2 hours into the 22-hour journey, Amara had seen enough to know there was a problem, but she wasn't prepared for what came next. When turbulence shook the cabin, Samantha returned to distribute drinks. As she reached across Amara to hand the suited man his scotch, her elbow knocked over a full cup of orange juice, directly onto Amara's laptop. The screen flickered, then went black. "My presentation," Amara whispered, panic knotting in her stomach. The London meeting she was preparing for, an acquisition worth $1.2 billion, depended on the data in that file. "Oh dear," Samantha said, her tone laced with condescension. "You should be more careful. Electronics and liquids don't mix." Amara looked up, her jaw tightening. "This was not my fault. I'd like your employee number to file a report." Samantha's mask slipped. "Are you threatening me?" she hissed under her breath. "You people always want something for free. An upgrade, compensation you don't deserve." Amara froze. "You people." The words cut like glass. A storm brewing across the aisle, a young Asian Australian woman, Sophia Chan, a lawyer returning from Sydney, watched with narrowed eyes. "I saw what happened," Sophia said quietly. "You've done nothing wrong." Samantha turned sharply. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when I see a passenger being harassed." Sophia replied evenly. Amara's pulse raced. She could feel the heat rising in her face. Not just from the humiliation, but from the cold certainty that Andre's warning was coming true. This flight wasn't just testing her principles. It was about to ignite a storm that could either destroy Aurora Air or force Amara to finally reveal who she really was. Amara's eyes stung from exhaustion as the cabin lights dimmed, casting the economy section in a sleepy haze. For hours into the 22-hour flight from Sydney to London, she had already catalogued a list of service failures and microaggressions from Samantha Miller, the senior flight attendant with a smile as sharp as a blade. The juice-soaked laptop lay lifeless in her bag, her critical presentation likely gone. Her mind churned through contingency plans for the acquisition meeting in London, but even her practiced focus was failing under the growing weight of irritation and fatigue. The tea she had consumed earlier, served reluctantly by Samantha only after Carlos, the junior attendant, had insisted, now pushed her bladder past its limits. She unbuckled her belt and carefully slid past the sleeping college student beside her, making her way down the aisle toward the rear lavatories. Samantha appeared as if summoned by an unseen signal, stepping in front of her like a gatekeeper. "These lavatories are being cleaned," she said firmly, though there was no cleaning cart or visible sign of maintenance. Amara paused, noting the vacant indicators above both doors. "How long will that take?" she asked, keeping her voice polite. "At least 30 minutes. You'll need to use the forward cabin facilities," Samantha replied without a hint of apology. Amara nodded, turning toward the front of the plane, but she didn't miss what happened next. A white woman approached from behind her, and without hesitation, Samantha stepped aside. "Right this way, ma'am," she said warmly, holding open one of the same lavatory doors she had just declared closed for cleaning. Amara's pulse quickened. She forced herself to keep moving, biting back the urge to confront Samantha on the spot. She needed to observe, to gather undeniable evidence of the pattern she suspected, even as her bladder ached with growing urgency. The walk to the forward cabin felt interminable, and when she arrived, she found a queue of 4 people already waiting. After 15 minutes, she finally reached the front only for the captain's voice to come over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing mild turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. With no choice, Amara retraced her steps back to row 32. As she passed row 15, she noticed William Parker, an older man in premium economy who had been laughing with Samantha earlier, smirking at her as if sharing an inside joke. Samantha caught her eye, too, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Amara inhaled deeply, summoning calm as she waited for the seatbelt sign to extinguish. 20 more minutes passed before the chime sounded, releasing passengers once more. She rose immediately and made her way back to the rear lavatories, which now showed green indicators. Just as her hand closed around the door handle, Samantha materialized again like a wraith. "I told you these are closed for cleaning," she said loudly enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. Amara turned to face her fully. "They show as vacant," she said evenly, "and I've observed several other passengers using them in the past half hour." "They were using the other facilities," Samantha shot back, though both doors clearly showed available. "I really need to use the restroom," Amara said, her voice calm but firm. "I've been waiting nearly an hour." "You need to follow crew instructions," Samantha said, raising her voice further. "That's a federal regulation." Passengers around them began to glance over curiously. Among them was Gregory Walsh, a tech marketing executive in premium economy, who had been observing Samantha's behavior throughout the flight. Without drawing attention to himself, he discreetly activated the camera on his phone. "I am following instructions," Amara replied. "I went to the forward lavatories as directed, waited in line, and was told to return to my seat due to turbulence. The seatbelt sign is now off. These facilities show as available, and I need to use them." Samantha's jaw tightened. "You're being difficult and disruptive," she said, her voice dripping with performative outrage. "I'm simply requesting to use an available restroom," Amara countered. "How is that disruptive?" Sophia Chan, the young lawyer who had been watching from her seat, stood suddenly. "Excuse me," she said clearly. "This passenger has been nothing but polite. You're the one creating a disruption." Samantha ignored her, leaning in toward Amara. "Do you make a habit of causing problems when you fly?" "Actually, I fly quite frequently," Amara replied, her voice icy calm. "I'm a frequent flyer with this airline and several others. I'm well aware of my rights as a passenger." Samantha let out a derisive laugh. "A frequent flyer in economy middle seats? My seating preference doesn't invalidate my status," Amara said, her posture straightening. Several passengers nodded in agreement. Samantha's eyes narrowed to slits as she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "People like you always think you deserve special treatment. You probably scammed your way into that frequent flyer status anyway." The air in the cabin seemed to freeze. A collective gasp rippled among the passengers within earshot. Gregory angled his phone to ensure the entire exchange was captured. Amara felt her temper snap taut like a wire on the edge of breaking. "I would like to speak to the purser or the captain about your conduct," she said with measured precision. Samantha let out a sharp laugh. "You think the captain has time for your complaints? Who exactly do you think you are?" Amara's voice remained calm, though her blood pounded in her ears. "I'm the CEO of a company." Samantha threw back her head and laughed. "Right? And I'm the Queen of England. A CEO wouldn't be sitting in economy dressed like that." "You have no idea who I am or what I do," Amara said softly but firmly. "And regardless of my profession, I deserve to be treated with basic respect." "Respect is earned," Samantha sneered, her voice rising. "And you haven't earned anything from me." The confrontation had drawn the attention of nearly every passenger in the rear cabin. Carlos appeared, his expression stricken. "Is everything all right here?" he asked nervously. "This passenger is refusing to follow crew instructions and becoming belligerent," Samantha said before Amara could speak. "That's not true," Sophia interrupted. "Your colleague has been preventing this woman from using the restroom while allowing others to do so." Carlos frowned. "The lavatories aren't being serviced right now. They're available for all passengers." "That's what I've been trying to explain," Amara said, her calm beginning to crack. Samantha's face flushed with fury. "You're undermining my authority, Carlos. I told this passenger repeatedly that these facilities are not available." "To her specifically?" Carlos asked, his voice dropping an octave. Samantha hesitated. "To anyone," she said, but her eyes flicked to Amara with unmasked hostility. "Because they don't make sense," Amara said, her voice low but tight with contained rage. "You've allowed multiple other passengers to use these exact restrooms while directing only me elsewhere." William Parker chose this moment to stand. "The flight attendant is just doing her job. Some people think they're above the rules." "What rules?" Sophia shot back. "The arbitrary ones being applied to only certain passengers?" The tension in the cabin was electric. Phones were raised discreetly in rows further up as more passengers began filming. Amara felt her breath steady in her chest. "I am going to use this restroom now," she said quietly, her hand reaching again for the door handle. Samantha's hand shot out, gripping Amara's wrist in a vice-like hold. "Don't you dare defy me," she spat. Amara pulled her arm free. "Do not touch me," she said, her voice calm but resonating like a warning bell. "That is assault." Something inside Samantha snapped. "You people always play the victim," she hissed, her face twisting with barely contained rage. Then, before anyone could react, Samantha raised her hand and struck Amara across the face with a sharp, resounding slap that echoed through the stunned cabin. The sound of the slap cracked through the cabin like a gunshot, silencing every murmur, every rustle of plastic cups and magazines. Amara staggered back a step, the sting on her cheek flaring hot, her glasses slipping from her face and clattering to the floor. For a single, frozen heartbeat, no one moved. Dozens of passengers stared wide-eyed, their disbelief mirrored in the wide-open mouths of the crew at the galley. Then the silence fractured as shock gave way to outrage. A woman gasped audibly. Someone shouted, "Did she just hit her?" A child began crying somewhere in the rows behind. Phones flew into hands, camera apps opening with trembling fingers as the sudden flurry of movement swept through the rear cabin. Amara's hand went to her burning cheek. The familiar steel of her self-discipline clicked into place, locking away the raw emotion clawing at her throat. She knelt slowly, picked up her glasses with calm, deliberate motions and slid them back on. Her voice, when it came, was low but deadly clear. "You just assaulted me." Samantha, her hand still hanging in the air as if even her body couldn't believe what it had done, blinked rapidly. Her face cycled from shock to horror, and then to defensive rage. "You provoked me?" she hissed, her voice trembling. But there was no conviction behind the words. "I warned you about causing a disruption." Gregory Walsh from Premium Economy shot to his feet, his phone raised high. "I got all of that," he announced in a booming voice that carried through the stunned cabin. "This woman did nothing wrong. She has been patient and polite for hours, and you've been harassing her nonstop. I've got the entire exchange on video." Samantha's gaze whipped toward him, her face paling as more passengers spoke up. "I saw her block that lady from the bathroom," said an elderly woman across the aisle, clutching her pearls. "She let other people go but kept stopping her." "Yeah," added a young man in a hoodie. "That was messed up. I was watching the whole time." Sophia Chun rose from her seat, her phone in one hand, her other pointing toward Samantha. "I'm an attorney, and I've documented a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior that culminated in physical assault. You need to step away from this passenger immediately." No, you don't understand," Samantha sputtered, her voice rising in pitch as her perfect mask of professionalism cracked. "She's been aggressive. She refused to follow instructions." "Enough," said a new, firm voice from the front of the cabin. A tall man in a polo shirt and jeans strode down the aisle with a badge flashing briefly in his hand. "Federal Air Marshal Thomas Davis. Everyone stay seated. Flight attendant, step away from the passenger now." Samantha's mouth opened and closed like a fish gulping for air. "But she... now." Davis's voice brooked no argument. He nodded to Carlos, who had been hovering helplessly behind Samantha, his face pale and stricken. Escort her to the galley. She is relieved of duty pending investigation. Yes, sir, Carlos said quickly, taking Samantha gently but firmly by the arm. This way. Samantha's body stiffened as she was guided toward the forward cabin, her face ashen under the harsh cabin lights. Her eyes darted wildly, catching sight of the raised phones pointed at her like a jury of digital witnesses. She stumbled once, her confidence shattered, and then disappeared past the curtain. The cabin erupted in whispers, the tension crackling like static. Parents shushed their children. Passengers leaned across aisles, whispering furiously to their neighbors. Did you see how she hit her? I've never seen anything like it. Isn't that the CEO of something? I swear I've seen her face before. She didn't even fight back. That was Grace under fire. Amara remained still, her hand lightly resting against her swollen cheek. The ice in her veins kept her upright, though her heart thudded so hard she feared someone would hear it. Carlos returned, his eyes glistening as he crouched beside her. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Are you hurt? Do you need first aid? I'll be fine, Amara replied calmly. But I would like to speak to the captain. Right away, Carlos said, jumping to his feet. Davis remained close, his steady presence radiating authority as he spoke quietly into his radio, relaying the incident to the cockpit. Amara's phone vibrated in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw Andre's name flashing on the screen. She stepped into the now vacant rear galley, turning her back to the cabin as she answered. Are you all right? Andre's voice was tight with suppressed panic. Amara, it's all over social media already. Someone's live streaming from the plane. CNN just picked it up. I'm aware, Amara said quietly. It happened less than 5 minutes ago. Do they know it's you yet? Not yet. I've stayed incognito so far. Amara, this is a PR wildfire. Legal's on standby, and the board wants to know if they should prepare a statement. Not yet, she said firmly. Don't confirm or deny anything. I'll handle it when I land. The London meeting? Might be delayed. My laptop was damaged earlier in the flight. I'll brief you later. Andre inhaled sharply but didn't argue. Understood. The legal team will keep monitoring. As she ended the call, Davis approached. Ma'am, the captain would like a word. Amara nodded, following him to the crew rest area where the captain, a weathered man in his 50s, waited with an apologetic expression. Ms. Washington, he said, using the name on her ticket. I've been informed of the incident. I want to personally apologize. We are diverting to Shannon Airport in Ireland to hand the crew member over to authorities and investigate properly. Is that necessary? Amara asked, mindful of the impact on the other passengers. Standard procedure in an assault case, the captain said gently. We cannot continue until law enforcement has cleared the situation. Understood, Amara replied. As she returned to her seat, Carlos appeared with an ice pack wrapped in a cloth napkin. Here, ma'am, for the swelling. I'm so sorry. Samantha. She was always difficult, but I never thought she'd go that far. Amara took the ice with a faint smile. You've been professional, Carlos. Thank you. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an onboard incident, we will be diverting to Shannon Airport in approximately 40 minutes. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts fastened. A collective groan rippled through the cabin, but no one protested loudly. The tension was still too thick. Sophia Chun approached, kneeling beside Amara's row. Miss Washington, I recognize you. You're Amara Ellis, aren't you? Amara met her gaze steadily. I am. Sophia's voice lowered to a whisper. Would you like me to act as your legal counsel? I've documented everything since boarding. Amara considered briefly before nodding. I'd appreciate that. Across the aisle, Gregory Walsh raised his phone. I've got clear video of everything from the lavatory incident to the slap. I'll send it to you if you need it. Thank you, Amara said sincerely. Ahead of her, passengers whispered and stared, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. Her phone vibrated again. Andre's text. Media requests pouring in. Video viral. Stock down 3%. London team informed. Amara exhaled slowly. Even here, in her own plane, her own company, wearing jeans and sneakers instead of her signature navy suit, she couldn't escape the prejudices that trailed her like a shadow. And now the world was watching. The plane touched down with a soft thud on the Shannon Airport runway, the tires screeching faintly as the engines roared in reverse thrust. Through the oval window, Amara watched the Irish tarmac rush past, her reflection faintly visible against the glass. The ice pack she held pressed gently to her cheek had already melted, the cold giving way to a dull ache that radiated down her jaw. The passengers, still hushed from the earlier chaos, craned their necks as police vehicles and airport security trucks rolled alongside the aircraft. A ripple of movement spread through the cabin as people peered through windows, whispering theories about the diversion. Somewhere in the forward galley, Samantha was being kept out of sight, her career in tatters and her confidence obliterated. Amara's fingers flexed tightly around the melted ice pack. She wasn't sure what burned hotter, the sting in her face or the anger coiled low in her chest. The intercom crackled and the captain's voice came on. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this unscheduled stop. Local authorities will be boarding shortly to address the incident. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." There was a collective groan, but no open protest. Everyone knew why they were here. As the plane taxied to a remote stand far from the terminal, Amara felt her phone buzz again. It was Andre. The screen lit up with a text. "Video over 10M views. Media knows a black female passenger was assaulted. Some speculation it's you. PR team is panicking. Board in emergency session." Amara's lips pressed into a tight line. She began typing a reply but stopped as movement caught her eye. Two uniformed officers and a security agent stepped into the plane, speaking briefly to the captain before heading toward the forward galley. Moments later, they emerged with Samantha walking stiffly between them, her face pale, her hands clutching each other in a white-knuckled grip. She didn't look up, didn't glance toward the cabin, not even as she passed Amara's row where phones tilted upward to record her exit. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was audible even above the soft drone of the plane's systems. Passengers whispered as Samantha disappeared down the jet bridge into waiting police custody, her once impeccable blonde bun unraveling strand by strand. Amara didn't flinch, didn't move. She simply watched. A moment later, a man in a sharp-tailored jet corporate suit boarded the plane. His polished shoes clicked on the floor as he strode down the aisle, flanked by two airline staffers who looked equally unsettled. He stopped in front of Amara's row and leaned forward slightly, his expression painted in corporate contrition. "Ma'am, my name is Raymond Phillips. I'm the regional director for Taylor Jet's European operations. On behalf of the entire company, I want to extend our deepest apologies for what you endured on this flight." Amara lifted her gaze to meet his, noting the faint sheen of sweat at his temple. He didn't recognize her. Of course he didn't. In her faded jeans, plain t-shirt, and with her natural hair pulled back in a modest bun, she was invisible to him. That was the point of these incognito flights until now. "Thank you," she said, her voice even. "What happens now?" Raymond cleared his throat. "We've removed the flight attendant from duty, and she will face immediate termination. We'd also like to offer you compensation for this terrible experience. An upgrade to first class for the remainder of your journey and a voucher for future travel. And of course, we'll be conducting a thorough investigation." Amara's lips curved slightly at the corners, though her eyes remained sharp. "Is this the standard response to physical assault aboard a Taylor jet flight?" Raymond faltered for just a fraction of a second before recovering. "We take all such incidents very seriously, I assure you. Our CEO, Ms. Ellis, has made diversity and inclusion central to our corporate values." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Amara. She adjusted the ice pack against her cheek, the cold long gone. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Phillips. For now, I'd like some privacy." "Of course," he said quickly. "We'll arrange that immediately." As Raymond stepped away to address the cabin, Andre's latest text flashed on her phone. Paris team worried. Beaumont Group suggests delaying acquisition meeting. Stock now down 5%. Amara stared at the message for a moment, her fingers tightening on the device. She wasn't worried about the stock. It would recover. What troubled her was something deeper, something more insidious. Even on her own plane, even as the billionaire CEO of TaylorJet, she had been treated as though she didn't belong. She thought of Samantha's words, her voice dripping with disdain. People like you always play the victim. Amara's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about her anymore. Across the aisle, Sophia Chun leaned forward in her seat. "Miss Ellis," she said quietly, confirming she had recognized her after all. "I've been documenting everything. If you need legal support, my firm specializes in discrimination cases." "Thank you, Miss Chen," Amara replied. "I'll consider it." A ripple of energy moved through the cabin as passengers shifted in their seats, their voices rising just above whispers. "Did you see how calm she stayed?" Someone murmured. "She didn't even raise her voice." "That flight attendant is toast," said another. "She didn't know who she was messing with." Amara's phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Viral video shows black woman slapped by TaylorJet attendant. Airline promises full investigation. They still didn't know it was her. Not yet, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. As the aircraft prepared to continue its journey to Paris, Raymond returned, his professional mask firmly in place. "Ma'am, we've secured a first-class seat for you. Please allow us to make the rest of your trip as comfortable as possible." Amara met his gaze steadily, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I appreciate the gesture, but I'm more interested in how your company plans to address the systemic issues that allow something like this to happen in the first place." Raymond's smile faltered. "I can assure you we're committed to our values." "Are you?" Amara asked softly, her eyes never leaving his. "Or are you just committed to protecting the company when something like this goes viral?" Raymond's Adam's apple bobbed as he struggled for a reply. "I'll be sure to pass along your concerns to senior leadership," he said finally. "You do that," Amara said evenly. "In the meantime, I'd like to rest. Please ensure no one disturbs me." "Of course," Raymond said, retreating quickly. Amara leaned back in her seat, her fingers brushing her cheek where Samantha's handprint still burned faintly. As the engines rumbled to life and the aircraft began taxiing toward the runway, she stared out at the gray Irish sky. Her reflection in the glass stared back, eyes calm, calculating. Little did Raymond or the world know that the woman they thought they were pacifying with a free upgrade and a voucher owned the entire company. The engines hummed steadily as the TaylorJet flight lifted once more into the overcast sky above Shannon Airport. Amara Ellis sat silently in the first-class cabin, her posture composed, her thoughts anything but still. The sting on her cheek had faded to a dull throb, but the fire it had ignited in her chest blazed hotter with every passing minute. Outside the window, clouds swallowed the plane whole as they began the short hop to Paris. Around her, the tension was palpable. The cabin crew moved with rigid precision, their smiles too tight, their voices too clipped. Every glance they cast her way was edged with nervousness, none daring to linger too long. They didn't yet know who she was, not fully, but word was spreading fast. Her phone vibrated again on the small table beside her seat, the screen lighting up with a message from Andre. "Video has hit 25 million views. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera all running segments. Stock down 7%. Beaumont Group CEO says acquisition talks on hold, pending your response." Amara exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around the phone. On the screen, she could see headlines multiplying like wildfire. "Passenger assaulted on TaylorJet flight. Is airline racism out of control? Incident sparks calls for boycott." The articles didn't identify her yet, but the comments were already swirling with speculation. Who was the black woman? Why was she flying economy? Amara could almost hear Samantha's voice again, dripping with contempt. "People like you always think you deserve special treatment." Her jaw tightened. Even after a decade of leading one of the most successful aviation companies in the world, even after building TaylorJet from nothing into an industry titan, this was how she was seen, still. As she stared at the screen, another message from Andre appeared. Board calling emergency session. PR team drafted statement condemning incident but want to know if they should disclose it was you. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she leaned back, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the darkened window. The face staring back wasn't that of the billionaire CEO the public adored in business magazines and on conference stages. Here, she looked like any other weary traveler. A black woman in a hoodie and jeans, hair pulled into a neat bun, no makeup, no armor of status or wealth to shield her from bias. That was intentional, of course. Traveling incognito had always been her way of testing her company's service. But this time, it hadn't just revealed flaws in policy. It had exposed something rotten at the core. A soft knock at her seat partition pulled her from her thoughts. Carlos, the flight attendant with kind eyes, stood there holding a fresh ice pack wrapped in linen. "Ma'am, I thought this might help," he said gently. "Are you comfortable? Is there anything else I can bring you?" "Thank you, Carlos," Amara said, accepting the pack. "You've been professional throughout this entire ordeal." A flicker of surprise crossed his face at her use of his name, but he masked it quickly with a nod. "I just want to say, what happened back there was inexcusable. I don't know what got into her." Amara studied him for a moment, sensing his sincerity. "You've been watching, haven't you?" she asked quietly. "You've seen how people like me are treated, even on this airline." Carlos hesitated, then nodded. "More times than I can count. We try to push back where we can, but—" His voice trailed off and he glanced over his shoulder. "Not everyone listens." "They'll listen now," Amara said softly, her words edged with resolve. As Carlos left, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Andre. "Media waiting at Charles de Gaulle. They don't know it's you yet. Board members are split. Some want to settle quietly. Others say you should make a public statement. What do you want to do?" Amara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her instinct screamed for her to stay quiet, to control the narrative from the shadows like she always had. But something in her refused. The slap on her cheek was more than a personal insult. It was a symptom of a culture that had gone unchecked for too long. Her phone buzzed again with a new alert. #FlyingWhileBlack trending worldwide. Passengers on Flight 237 speaking out. She tapped the notification and scrolled through posts from people who had been on board. One video showed her standing calmly at the lavatory door as Samantha hissed in her face. Another captured Sophia Chun rising from her seat to defend her. The comments seethed with outrage. "She stayed so calm. That attendant should be fired. This is why I stopped flying Taylor Jet. I hope the CEO does something about this." Amara's lips pressed into a thin line. If only they knew the CEO was already here, sitting in first class with an ice pack against her cheek. Another soft knock at her seat drew her eyes up. Sophia Chun stood there, clutching a small notebook. "Miss Ellis," she said quietly, confirming she had indeed recognized her. "I've documented everything from the seat reassignment to the assault. If you need legal support, my firm would be honored to assist." Amara regarded her for a long moment. Sophia's expression was calm but determined. "Thank you," Amara said. "You may be hearing from me soon." As Sophia nodded and returned to her seat, Amara's phone lit up with yet another alert. Taylor Jet stock plunges 8%. Analysts warn of long-term reputational damage. The numbers didn't faze her. Stocks rise and fall, that was the nature of the market. What mattered now wasn't the share price but the integrity of her company, the culture she thought she'd built. As the plane began its descent into Paris, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing at Charles de Gaulle in approximately 20 minutes. Please remain seated as we prepare for arrival." Amara's phone buzzed with one final message from Andre. "Media waiting at the terminal. Beaumont Group CEO says acquisition may be off if leadership doesn't demonstrate strong response. Do you want to disembark with other passengers or last?" Amara's fingers flew across the screen. "Last. I need time to plan." She looked out the window at the sprawling lights of Paris glittering against the night sky. What had begun as a routine incognito flight had evolved into something far bigger than she could have anticipated. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't even just about Taylor Jet. This was about every passenger who had ever been treated as less than human because of the color of their skin, the way they spoke, or the clothes they wore. The plane touched down with a soft bump. Applause rippled half-heartedly through the cabin, but the usual cheer of relief was replaced by an air of unease. Passengers glanced furtively at Amara as they gathered their belongings, some offering small nods of solidarity, others averting their eyes. As the cabin emptied, Amara remained seated, her phone buzzing non-stop with notifications. She silenced it and took a deep breath, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened window. The woman looking back wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a symbol, and symbols didn't hide. They stood. As the last passenger disembarked, Carlos returned. "Miss Ellis," he said quietly, the name tasting foreign on his tongue now that he knew. "The media is swarming the gate. The captain asks if you want to use a side exit." Amara shook her head. "No, let them see me." Carlos nodded solemnly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad it was you." "So am I," Amara replied softly. "Otherwise nothing would change." As she stood and gathered her bag, the hum of cameras and raised voices grew louder beyond the cabin door. Andre's final text blinked on her phone. Press conference or private settlement. Entire industry watching. Amara Ellis exhaled slowly, her shoulders squaring as she stepped toward the exit. "Press conference," she typed back. "It's time." The heavy glass doors to the Taylor Jet Paris office whispered shut behind Amara Ellis as she stepped into the press room, her heels clicking softly on the polished marble floor. The room was alive with murmurs, camera flashes bursting like lightning against a stormy sky. Reporters from every major network packed the space, their eyes trained on the podium where the airline's logo gleamed under bright studio lights. Beyond the cameras, monitors displayed live feeds of news anchors speculating in hushed tones. Breaking. Taylor Jet CEO to address assault incident. Sources confirm victim was Amara Ellis herself. Amara's presence silenced the hum instantly. Gone was the incognito traveler in sneakers and jeans. Now she was every inch the commanding force who had built an empire. Her tailored navy suit hugged her frame perfectly, her natural hair pulled back into a sleek twist. The faint swelling on her cheek from Samantha's slap was still visible, but she wore it like a badge of defiance. In her hand, she clutched a slim leather folio. Not notes, but a plan. She had always worked best in crises, and this was the storm she intended to master. Andre Johnson stood near the edge of the stage, phone in hand, nodding at her with a tight smile. "They're ready, Amara," he murmured. "The world's watching." She didn't need the reminder. Since the moment a passenger's shaky phone video had captured Samantha striking her across the face, the incident had ignited a global conversation. #FlyingWhileBlack was trending in 20 countries. Civil rights leaders, celebrities, and everyday travelers alike had weighed in, demanding answers, demanding change. And now every eye, every camera lens, was waiting for her next move. Amara stepped forward, her presence filling the room with an electric tension. The murmurs stopped. A hush spread across the space so complete that even the cameras seemed to pause, their blinking lights like held breaths. She adjusted the microphone slightly, her steady gaze sweeping the assembled press. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of steel that silenced even the most restless reporters. "My name is Amara Ellis, and as many of you have now learned, I am the passenger who was assaulted aboard Taylor Jet Flight 237 from New York to Paris." A ripple of sound moved through the room, a collective intake of breath as dozens of journalists tapped furiously on keyboards, their tweets and headlines already taking shape. Amara held up a hand, commanding silence once more. "I was traveling under a pseudonym, as I often do, to experience firsthand the service my customers receive. What I experienced was not only unacceptable but indicative of a larger issue within the airline industry and society at large." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over them like storm clouds gathering before lightning. This isn't just about one employee's actions or one company's policies. It's about how bias, both conscious and unconscious, shapes the way people are treated every single day. A flashbulb popped, followed by another. Amara ignored them, her focus razor-sharp. As the CEO of Taylor Jet, I take full responsibility for what occurred on my aircraft. And I want to be clear, this will not be swept under the rug. It will not end with apologies or compensation packages designed to silence the victims of discrimination. Her voice sharpened, each word landing like a hammer. It will end only when we dismantle the systems that allowed it to happen in the first place. Behind her, the screens lit up with bullet points as she outlined sweeping reforms. Mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation training for all staff, a new passenger advocate position on every long-haul flight, independent oversight of discrimination complaints, and transparent reporting systems for customers and employees alike. But she wasn't done. Effective immediately, Taylor Jet will partner with an independent task force to audit every level of our operations, from hiring to in-flight service, to identify and eliminate practices that allow discrimination to persist. Another wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reporters glanced at one another, realizing the enormity of what she was pledging. This wasn't damage control. This was war on the status quo. Amara took a steadying breath. Her hand brushed the faint bruise on her cheek. I also want to speak directly to the millions of people who have watched the video of that flight. I understand the outrage, the pain, and the frustration you feel because I've lived it. Even as a billionaire, even as the CEO of the company whose name was on that plane. Her voice wavered slightly, but she steadied it again, steel returning. My wealth and position didn't protect me from bias, and that should tell you everything you need to know about how pervasive this problem is. For the first time, Amara allowed her eyes to soften. But I will use my position to ensure no one else has to experience what I did. Not on my airline and not, if I can help it, in this industry. A hand shot up in the front row. Miss Ellis, what will happen to the flight attendant involved? A CNN reporter asked sharply. Amara's expression didn't flicker. Her employment with Taylor Jet has been terminated, effective immediately. The matter is now in the hands of legal authorities, and I will cooperate fully with any investigation. Another reporter stood, his voice cutting through the tense air. Some critics say you're only acting now because you were the victim. How do you respond to that? Amara's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes stayed hard. They're right, she said simply. A murmur spread through the crowd. They're right that my experience forced me to see more clearly the gaps in our culture. But what separates leaders from bystanders is not whether they make mistakes. It's how they respond when they see injustice. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping lower but somehow growing more powerful. This isn't about saving face. It's about saving lives, dignity, and trust. Behind the cameras, Taylor Jet board members watched nervously. The stock price had tumbled another 2% since the press conference began, but Amara didn't care. Stocks would recover. Her integrity would not if she failed to act now. As the final question was called, Amara glanced at Andre, who gave her a subtle nod. I'll take one last question, she said, her voice calm but final. A young black woman at the back raised her hand timidly. Miss Ellis, what would you say to other black women who've faced this kind of treatment but don't have your resources or your platform? The question pierced Amara's armor, but she didn't falter. I'd say this: you matter. Your dignity matters. And if you don't yet have a platform, I'll lend you mine. Her gaze swept the room, daring anyone to challenge her resolve. This is not just about one flight or one slap. This is about creating a world where every person, regardless of their skin color, gender, or background, can board a plane and expect respect. And I promise you, I will not rest until that world exists. Cameras clicked furiously as Amara stepped back from the podium. Reporters shouted questions, but she didn't respond. Andre moved to escort her away, his phone already buzzing with calls from investors, board members, and legal counsel. As they exited the room, the roar of the press conference followed her like a thunderstorm retreating into the distance. Outside the Taylor Jet office, Crowds had gathered in the street, chanting her name. Some held signs, "Justice for Amara," "Dignity in the skies," "End airline discrimination now." Amara paused for a moment, watching the sea of faces before her. For the first time since the slap, she felt the faintest flicker of hope. Not because the work was done, it was only beginning, but because for the first time, she knew she wasn't alone. Amara Ellis sat alone in the corner office of Taylor Jet's Paris headquarters, the city lights flickering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like nervous fireflies. Her phone vibrated relentlessly on the mahogany desk, lighting up with urgent messages from Andre. Beaumont Group reconsidering meeting. CNN looping the slap video every hour. Taylor Jet stock down 9% and sliding. Amara closed her eyes for a brief moment, pressing the cold edge of her tumbler against her swollen cheek. The faint burn of Samantha Brooks' handprint still radiated outward, not from the physical pain it had dulled, but from the humiliation. The billionaire CEO of one of the fastest-growing airlines in the world, slapped on her own aircraft by a senior flight attendant who didn't even know her name. She could still hear Samantha's words echoing in her mind. "You people always think you deserve special treatment." Amara gritted her teeth, the phrase cutting deeper than the slap itself. Her laptop sat dark and lifeless on the desk, a casualty of the orange juice accident that Samantha had caused mid-flight. That device had contained every projection, synergy model, and strategic pitch she'd prepared for months to finalize the Beaumont Group's acquisition of Aerolux. Without it, her negotiating position was vulnerable. Worse yet, her ability to project strength to the board, already shaken by the public relations nightmare, was crumbling. She stared at the Paris skyline, tracing the reflection of her own face in the glass. Was the swelling on her cheek still visible? Would the investors see her as a victim now instead of a visionary? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Andre stepped into the office, moving carefully as though approaching a wounded animal. He carried her spare laptop and a folder of hastily printed financial reports. "Amara, we need to talk." She raised a hand, silencing him before he could launch into another cascade of bad news. "I know, Andre. The stock is bleeding. The board is panicking. And Beaumont wants to postpone the meeting." He hesitated. "Worse, they're questioning if Taylor Jet's culture aligns with their brand values. Their CEO, Charles Hamilton, said the incident reflects poorly on our leadership." Amara laughed dryly, a sound that carried no humor. "On our leadership? I was the one assaulted on my own plane." "They don't care about that," Andre replied softly. "All they see is a company in crisis. Investors are skittish, and competitors are circling like sharks." Amara's fingers drummed the desk, her nails tapping a restless rhythm. She had spent her life proving people wrong. Her teachers who told her Harvard wasn't realistic for a black girl from South Chicago. Her classmates who thought she was a scholarship case. Her early investors who smiled politely but bet against her. And now, after clawing her way to a net worth of $4.2 billion and building Taylor Jet from a disruptive startup to an aviation powerhouse, one employee's prejudice threatened to unravel everything. "Pull up every comment, every media report, every social post about the incident," Amara instructed. Andre raised an eyebrow. "You want me to filter out the noise? I can have PR draft a response." "No," she interrupted sharply. "I want the noise. All of it." Within minutes, her second laptop lit up with a flood of content. Videos of the slap had gone viral, with one TikTok clip hitting 20 million views in less than 12 hours. The comments were a battlefield. "This is why I don't fly anymore. Racism at 38,000 feet. She should have revealed she owned the plane. These people never listen unless you pull rank. What's the point of diversity initiatives if CEOs still get slapped on their own aircraft? Cancel Taylor Jet. No excuse. This could be the moment that changes the airline industry forever." Amara's eyes narrowed at that last comment. Maybe they were right. Maybe this wasn't just about one slap or one flight. Maybe this was her moment to burn the old system to the ground and rebuild it. On her terms. Andre's voice cut through her thoughts. "The board called an emergency session. They're split. Some want you to settle quietly. Others think you should make a public statement before the market opens. Amara stood abruptly, her chair spinning behind her. If I settle quietly, I betray every black woman who's ever been told to sit down and take it. If I make a weak statement, I give the racists exactly what they want: a headline, a soundbite, and no real change. She strode to the window, staring out at the glow of Paris. Her reflection stared back, hard-eyed and unyielding. No, we don't do quiet. We don't do weak. I built this company to be different. Now it's time to prove it. Andre swallowed hard. He had seen that look before, when she decided to take on the entrenched airline giants, when she negotiated her first billion-dollar acquisition, when she refused to compromise her vision despite every obstacle. "What are you thinking?" he asked cautiously. Amara turned, her eyes blazing. "I'm thinking I walk into that Beaumont meeting tomorrow and flip this narrative on its head. I don't beg them to believe in Taylor Jet. I make them afraid of being left behind." Andre hesitated. "And the slap video? We use it," she said simply. "The world saw what happened. Now I'll show them what happens next. If I can be slapped on my own aircraft, it proves how broken this system is. And I'll make fixing it my mission, not just my brand." Andre exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You're insane." "No," Amara corrected, a faint smile curling her lips. "I'm inevitable." As the night deepened, she worked furiously with Andre, outlining a plan that was equal parts corporate strategy and moral crusade. Mandatory anti-bias training, transparent reporting systems, an independent diversity oversight board, and most radical of all, a commitment to publicly releasing data on discriminatory complaints across the airline industry. The plan was audacious, risky, but so was every great leap she had ever taken to by3am. Amara finally leaned back in her chair, her eyelids heavy but her mind still sharp. Andre had dozed off on the couch, his phone buzzing quietly beside him. On her own phone, the screen flashed with yet another notification. #Amarellis trending worldwide. She stared at it for a long moment, then set the device face down. Tomorrow, the world would learn who she really was, not just a billionaire CEO, but a black woman who refused to be diminished, even at 38,000 feet. And in the sterile boardroom of the Beaumont Group, with cameras rolling and investors holding their breath, Amara Ellis planned to take the humiliation of that slap and turn it into the spark that would set the entire industry ablaze. Amara Ellis could feel the tension in the cabin like a taut wire ready to snap. The hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop, but every small interaction carried an edge. Passengers were watching her now. Not all, but enough for her to notice the furtive glances and whispered words. Some had their phones angled subtly, recording, though they likely didn't know they were filming the billionaire owner of the very aircraft they sat in. She had spent years perfecting her ability to remain calm under scrutiny, but even she could feel the heat rising beneath her skin as Samantha Brooks' voice cut through the narrow aisle once again. "Ma'am," Samantha said, her tone dripping with faux authority. "I've already told you those lavatories are unavailable. You're going to need to return to your seat immediately." Amara's jaw tightened. She stood squarely in front of the lavatory door, the vacant sign glowing green behind Samantha's perfectly coiffed blonde head. "They're clearly available," Amara replied, her voice even but low, carrying the weight of someone who had repeated herself far too many times already. "And I've been waiting for nearly an hour." Nearby passengers had begun to take notice. A businessman across the aisle shifted in his seat, his phone raised slightly higher. A young woman, Sophia Chun, whom Amara had seen earlier offering her a bottle of water when Samantha forgot to bring it, watched with a growing frown. The air felt thicker now. Amara felt the urge to step back, to avoid escalation, but she forced herself to stay rooted. This wasn't just about using a lavatory. It was about every moment she'd endured on this flight, every microaggression, every deliberate slight. Samantha's voice sharpened, her words like brittle glass. "You're disrupting the cabin and challenging crew instructions. That's a federal offense, ma'am. Do you understand that?" Amara blinked once, slow and deliberate. "I understand that you've allowed multiple passengers to use this lavatory while repeatedly denying me access." She kept her voice calm, steady, though her heartbeat thrummed like a drum in her ears. "Now I suggest you step aside before this situation escalates further." A murmur rippled through the nearby rows. Sophia stood suddenly, her voice cutting through the charged silence. "Excuse me, but I've been watching. This passenger hasn't done anything wrong. She's been polite and patient." Samantha's head snapped toward Sophia, her mask of professionalism slipping slightly. "This doesn't concern you." "It does if I'm witnessing harassment," Sophia countered, her voice steady. "And for the record, I'm an attorney." Samantha's cheeks flushed crimson, but before she could respond, another voice spoke up. "Ma'am, you've been nothing but rude to her all flight," said a man a few rows back, holding his phone high to ensure he captured the entire exchange. "I've got this on video, just so you know." The situation had tipped now, moving beyond Samantha's control. Even William Parker, the elderly man who had earlier shared a smirk with Samantha as Amara was sent to the forward cabin to wait in line, looked uneasy. Amara took a breath, her voice quiet but resonant. "I'm going to use this lavatory now. If you attempt to stop me, you will regret it." She reached for the handle. It happened so fast no one was certain who moved first. Samantha's hand shot out, gripping Amara's wrist with surprising force. "Don't you dare defy me," Samantha hissed under her breath, her eyes wild with something between rage and fear. Amara didn't flinch. She twisted her arm free with a sharp, practiced motion and stepped back. "Do not touch me again," she said, her voice low and dangerous. The cabin had gone utterly silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. Samantha's face contorted, her teeth bared in a snarl. "You people always play the victim," she spat, and before Amara could react, Samantha's hand came up in a wide arc and struck her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Gasps erupted from all around. Amara staggered back slightly, her glasses flying off and clattering to the floor. A red mark bloomed across her cheek, the heat of it immediate. For one frozen moment, no one moved. Passengers stared in shock. A baby began crying somewhere in the rear of the cabin. And then, chaos. "Did she just? I got that on video. Call the captain." Voices overlapped as phones came out in unison, recording from every angle. Carlos Rivera, the only attendant who had shown Amara any kindness throughout the flight, rushed down the aisle. He positioned himself between Amara and Samantha, his expression horrified. "What have you done?" he asked Samantha, his voice breaking. Samantha seemed frozen, her hand still half raised. Her face drained of color as she glanced around and saw the dozens of phones aimed at her, the collective outrage boiling over in the passengers' voices. "She provoked me?" Samantha stammered, but even she seemed to hear how weak it sounded. "She did no such thing," Sophia Chan shot back. "I witnessed the entire interaction. That was an unprovoked assault." The man with the phone stepped closer. "I've got it all on camera. You're finished, lady." Amara stood perfectly still, one hand pressed lightly against her cheek. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't tremble. Instead, she felt an icy calm settle over her, the kind of clarity she'd learned long ago in boardrooms where everyone underestimated her. She looked up at Samantha, her voice calm and cutting. "Do you know who I am?" Samantha blinked, her lips parting but no sound coming out. "I'm Amara Ellis," Amara said, her tone measured, her eyes locked on Samantha's. "I own this airline. I own this plane. And you just slapped the CEO of Taylor Jet." The words spread through the cabin like wildfire. Passengers gasped audibly. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," while others murmured in disbelief. Carlos turned to Amara, his voice hushed. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" Amara shook her head slightly, her voice steady as ever. "No, but I want this employee's badge number and to speak to the captain immediately." A commotion erupted at the front of the cabin as a tall man stepped forward, flashing a badge. "Federal Air Marshal Davis," he announced. "Everyone stay calm." "Ma'am," he said to Samantha, his tone brooking no argument. "You are relieved of duty effective immediately. Please step away from the passenger." Samantha's lips quivered as she tried to protest, but the air marshal silenced her with a look. Now, as Samantha was escorted toward the forward galley, the cabin filled with a cacophony of voices, passengers whispering, murmuring, some still filming. Amara's phone buzzed insistently in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. Andre, the slap video is everywhere. CNN picked it up. Stock dropping fast. Call me now. Amara inhaled slowly and exhaled. The heat in her cheek was sharp, but her mind was sharper. She wasn't just the victim of an assault. She was holding in her hands the catalyst for a storm that could either destroy Taylor Jet or transform it forever. Amara Ellis sat stiffly in the crew rest row, her cheek still throbbing from the slap, though the pain felt distant now compared to the roar in her mind. The hum of the engines blended with the muffled murmurs from the passengers behind her, the whispers carrying her name like ripples through water. Amara Ellis, the billionaire, the CEO of Taylor Air. The woman Samantha Brooks had just assaulted in front of dozens of witnesses. She pressed her fingers lightly against the tender flesh of her cheek, feeling the raised welt there, and forced herself to breathe deeply. The air marshal had taken control swiftly, confining Samantha in the forward galley, but the damage was already done. Or maybe, Amara thought grimly, the real damage was just beginning. Her phone vibrated in her lap again, screen flashing with Andre's name. She answered quietly, aware of the prying eyes all around her. Andre. His voice was taut with barely restrained panic. Amara, are you all right? It's all over social media already. There are live streams. Passengers uploaded the video before the plane even hit cruising altitude. She closed her eyes briefly, picturing the inevitable headlines. I'm fine. Physically, at least. You don't sound fine. I'm focused, she corrected him flatly. Tell me how bad it is. Bad doesn't cover it, Andre said. The video doesn't show the lead-up. It just shows the slap. News outlets are running it on repeat. They don't know it's you yet, but they're tearing into Taylor Air for allowing racism in the skies. Stock is down 6% and falling. Amara let the words settle in her chest like lead weights. She had known this undercover flight might reveal cracks in her company's culture, but she hadn't anticipated it becoming an international scandal midair. Do not confirm my identity yet, she said coolly. Not to the media, not even to the board. This is my situation to manage, and I'll handle it when I land. Andre hesitated. The Bowery Group deal. If they think you've lost control of your own airline, they'll pull out. They've already sent feelers asking about leadership culture at Taylor Air. Amara's jaw tightened. The Bowery acquisition wasn't just another deal. It was the linchpin to Taylor Air's global expansion, and it had taken 18 months of negotiations to bring them to the table. One act of violence on her plane, and the whole thing could unravel. She opened her eyes and found Carlos Rivera kneeling in the aisle beside her. The flight attendant's expression was stricken with concern. Miss Ellis, he said softly, using the alias from her boarding pass. Are you sure you don't need medical attention? We can request a physician meet us on the ground. Amara shook her head. Thank you, Carlos, but no. What I need is for you to sit with me for a moment. Carlos looked startled but complied, taking the jump seat across from her. I noticed, she said, keeping her voice low, how you treated every passenger on this flight with kindness and professionalism. I also noticed how your colleague did not. Carlos' face darkened. I didn't know it had gotten this bad. I tried to intervene earlier, but... His voice faltered. You're not at fault, Amara said firmly. But you've shown me something invaluable tonight. A fresh announcement over the intercom interrupted her thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. Due to an onboard incident, we will be diverting to Shannon Airport in Ireland. We expect to land in approximately 40 minutes. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts fastened. The collective groan from the passengers was audible. Amara understood their frustration, but the decision was standard protocol for an assault mid-flight. As the plane descended, her phone buzzed again. Another update from Andre. Paris team informed. Bowery Group agreed to delay the meeting until tomorrow afternoon. Stock down 8%. PR team demanding direction. Legal prepping a statement. Amara stared at the glowing screen, her mind a storm of calculations. This wasn't just about her dignity anymore. This was about the future of everything she had built. The moment she stepped off this plane, she would no longer have the luxury of anonymity. Every word, every choice would be dissected under a global microscope. Carlos returned with an ice pack wrapped in a cloth napkin. "For your cheek," he said gently. "I'm so sorry, Miss Ellis. I never imagined this could happen on one of our flights." Amara accepted it with a small, measured nod. "Thank you, Carlos. And please call me Amara." The landing gear deployed with a jolt, and Amara looked out the window at the misty tarmac of Shannon Airport. Police vehicles and airport security waited near a remote stand. As the plane rolled to a stop, Captain Reynolds came over the intercom once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, local authorities will be boarding shortly to address the incident. Please remain in your seats." The cabin door opened, and the Irish police boarded briskly. Samantha was escorted off the aircraft, her shoulders hunched and her face pale. She didn't look at Amara as she passed, though Amara watched her go with a mix of icy calm and simmering resolve. Moments later, a man in a Taylor Air corporate uniform boarded the plane. Raymond Phillips, the airline's regional director for Europe. He approached Amara's row, his expression schooled into polite sympathy. "Ma'am, on behalf of Taylor Air, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for this appalling incident. We'd like to offer you compensation for your experience, including an upgrade to first class for the remainder of your journey and a travel voucher." Amara studied him carefully, her lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. "And has Taylor Air had similar complaints about discriminatory treatment before?" Raymond hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to discuss internal matters, but I assure you we take these allegations very seriously." "I hope so," Amara said softly, "because if you don't, this won't be the last time you're forced to address them on a runway surrounded by flashing lights." She adjusted the ice pack against her cheek, her mind sharpening into a spear point. The world didn't know yet that the woman sitting here in faded jeans and a hoodie owned the aircraft they were flying in. But they would soon. And when they did, Amara Ellis intended to turn this moment of humiliation into a reckoning for the entire industry. As the plane prepared to resume its journey to Paris, Andre's latest text arrived. "Media swarming CDG airport. Taylor Air stock down 10%. Hashtags #flying while black and #Taylor Air trending worldwide. CNN wants a statement. BBC 2. What's your move?" Amara's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she drafted her reply. "Tell them nothing. I'll speak for myself in Paris." Because when Amara Ellis spoke, the world would have no choice but to listen.